like to thank everybody for coming out today at very, very short notice and on a lovely sunny Sunday afternoon. I know I saw many of you last night at about 4 o'clock in the morning, so particularly commendations to yourselves. We're here today to show solidarity with the people of Sheikh Jarrah. Today is an International Day of Solidarity with Sheikh Jarrah, and I would like to just briefly outline the situation there and what it is that today's protest symbolises. Sheikh Jarrah is a Palestinian neighbourhood in occupied East Jerusalem. Following the eviction of 4 Palestinian families from their home to make room for Israeli colonial settlers last year, local residents began a determined campaign of civil protest, which has become a symbol of opposition to the occupation of Palestine and for Palestinian-Israeli cooperation against the occupation. Sheikh Jarrah is home to 3,000 Palestinians who recognise that the series of evictions will not stop until they are all dispossessed. It is vital that expulsions and attempted colonisations like those in Sheikh Jarrah are stopped. This August marks the first anniversary of the expulsion of the Gawi and Hanoun families from their homes in Sheikh Jarrah. All over the world, including in 8 Israeli cities, humanitarian activists are marking this anniversary in an international show of solidarity with the dispossessed families. The struggle in Sheikh Jarrah is a non-violent democratic struggle. We support the non-violent resistance to the occupation in Palestine. Varied activities are carried out in protest against the colonial settlement enterprise. For the past 6 months, weekly demonstrations involving hundreds of participants, Palestinians, Israelis and internationals, have been held every Friday afternoon on the outskirts of the neighbourhood. These protests, along with the protests in Bilain, Nilain and other areas in the West Bank, show the ongoing determination and resistance of the Palestinian people, and we commend them for this. Protest marches are held in East and West Jerusalem, and volunteers take shifts sleeping in the neighbourhood to support and protect families from settler and state aggression. I'm going to move so that doesn't squeak. I suppose just briefly to talk a little bit about East Jerusalem. It was annexed illegally by Israel in 1967, and such any Israeli expansion into the area is illegal under international law. East Jerusalem is accepted internationally as the capital of any future Palestinian state, and ethnic cleansing, such as we are seeing in Sheikh Jarrah, represents part of the Israeli state's broader policy of preventing a viable Palestinian state from emerging by creating irreversible facts on the ground. Across the West Bank, other families are being expelled from their homes and cut off from their land, only to see their land taken by armed Israeli colonial settlers and guarded by the Israeli military. We must remember that Israeli colonial settlers in the West Bank are illegal under international law. Despite this, they are subject to Israeli civil law. Palestinians living on their own land in the West Bank and Gaza are, however, subject to Israeli military law. This is unjust. This is yet another example of Israeli state apartheid. This is yet another example of how Zionism is racism. And this is yet another fact that we cannot afford to ignore. Here in Ireland and all across the world today, people are marking the ongoing resistance of the people in Sheikh Jarrah against Israeli state apartheid, against Zionism, and against the theft and the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. We need to continue to resist. We need to show our solidarity. We can do this in many, many ways, from grassroots activism to political lobby work. But the most effective way that any of us, as individuals, as groups, as members of civil society, as members of political parties, as within our workplace, within our schools, within our universities, the most effective thing we can do is to enact a campaign of boycott, divestment and sanctions against the Israeli state and against Israeli state-funded organisations until such a time as the Israeli state complies fully with international law. Until such a time as the Israeli state shows respect for human rights, and until such a time as we see an end to this regime of apartheid. We must fight the occupation. We must fight the siege of Gaza. We must put an end to Zionism. This can only happen if coordinated civil society movements like our own, like the Ireland-Palestine Solidarity Campaign, work in conjunction with Palestinians and heed the calls from Palestinian civil society for a campaign of boycott, divestment and sanctions. If you are interested in getting involved or finding out what you can do, whether it be consumer boycott, academic boycott, a cultural boycott of Israel, or getting involved in lobbying your government or writing to your local politicians with regard to imposing sanctions on Israel, do contact us. Come to our branch meetings which happen every second Thursday. Look at our website www.ipsc.ie. Find out what you can do. Do something, make a change. It is unbelievable what giving up 2 hours of your life can do to make a change to the people in Palestine and also to the people in Israel, many of whom, like groups like Anarchists Against the Wall, support the Palestinian resistance, call for an end to the occupation and try to work together with their fellow people to end this apartheid regime. The responsibility is on us here as good, open, honest-minded citizens of Ireland or of any other country internationally to show our support for the ongoing resistance of the Palestinian people. People want to do a bit of chanting before we finish up? All right, thanks. Free, free Palestine!
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 Free, free Palestine!